When I was 6, my father died in a car accident. A few months later, my mother vanished without explanation. I ran from that house believing I would never set foot in it again. But 20 years later, I had no choice but to return. And waiting for me there was a truth my grandmother, Margaret Hayes, had hidden her entire life. At 6 years old, I lost my father, and my mother simply disappeared. People whispered that she'd suffered a breakdown, that she needed treatment, and that was all anyone dared to say. I grew up in a house where nobody cried, nobody asked questions, and nobody remembered. By 16, I couldn't take it anymore. I left, ditched the rules, the silence, the suffocating rituals. I told myself I was gone for good. But 20 years later, I was pulled back. A will, a single key, and a single line. You will get what you were looking for. The truth. I unlocked that door and stepped into what was meant to break me. But things didn't play out the way she had planned. The news of my grandmother's death came in a letter, not a phone call. Somehow that felt fitting. Even after she was gone, Margaret Hayes controlled every word. The envelope was pale green with embossed edges, the handwriting sharp and deliberate. The message was blunt. Private will reading, mandatory attendance, no lawyers. No sympathy. No acknowledgement of loss. As if she hadn't died at all, just shut down like some old institution that outlived its purpose. I sat in my New York apartment with the letter on my lap, thinking about one thing. I had sworn never to go back. And yet there I was, a plane ticket already in my online cart, my suitcase half-packed, my heart racing as if I were about to walk into a courtroom. To step away from the life I'd built, even for a few days, and set foot in that house again, the same ground that remembered the night I fled at 16. Barefoot in the rain, backpack on my shoulder, praying the world would forget I ever existed. Hayes Hill. The family estate that time never touched. A 2-story mansion with white columns that didn't look like design, they looked like punishment. Perfect hedges. Heavy walls that seemed to listen. Nothing ever moved in that place. The staff followed Margaret's strict rule: no changes, no updates, no trace of time. Everything there was flawless. Especially the silence. This time, I wasn't coming back as the obedient granddaughter or the broken girl I had been. I was returning as an outsider. Maybe even as an enemy. The will reading was set to be family only. No notary. No outsiders. Just us. Always us. Everything had to stay in the family, even the inheritance. I showed up late in the evening. The car crawled down the gravel road, every bend pulling me deeper into memories I wished I had buried. My chest tightened when the house came into view. It hadn't changed a bit. No one came out to greet me. The front door stood slightly open. Inside, the air was thick, musty, heavy, like the house had been holding its breath for decades. In the living room, I found faces I hadn't seen in years. Uncle Victor slouched in a worn jacket that smelled faintly of whiskey. Aunt Helen sat upright, pearls at her throat, her smile too tight to be kind. And Adrian, my cousin. He had once been the quiet boy who hid behind me when life got too loud. Now he stood sharp, composed, unreadable. Our eyes met. Nothing. Not even a flicker of recognition. "Clara," Aunt Helen finally said. "You came." "The letter said I had to," I answered. She only nodded, lips pressed thin. In the corner sat Irene, the maid who had served my grandmother longer than I had been alive. Balanced on her lap was a thin leather notebook. "We can begin," she said softly. "As soon as everyone's here." "Everyone is here," Adrian replied. The silence that followed was suffocating, the kind that pressed on your ears. And in that silence, I felt like the child who once woke screaming in the night and quickly learned never to make a sound. Only now, I wasn't back to stay quiet. Irene set the notebook on the coffee table like it might burn her hands. The hush was so dense I could hear Aunt Helen's bracelet jingle as she fiddled with her earring. Uncle Victor shut his eyes, lips moving like he was whispering a prayer. Adrian leaned against the armrest, his gaze locked on me, cataloging every twitch of my face. "This isn't exactly a will," Irene said, her voice low, almost apologizing. She refused to involve a notary. She never trusted outsiders. I froze. Of course she hadn't. Margaret Hayes trusted no one beyond her bloodline, and even inside it, her faith was conditional. I also knew this couldn't be the official will. By law, that document had to be filed and kept by a lawyer or in the county register. This wasn't about legality. This was something else, Margaret's own tradition. A private reading. A performance where only her rules mattered. Irene opened the notebook and began to read. Her voice was flat, drained of life, but the words cut like glass. This wasn't a will, it was a sentence. A ruler's last decree. Victor, you failed me before you even grew your first whisker. Your inheritance waits in the attic, right beside all your wasted ambitions. I caught the twitch of my uncle's fist tightening, but he swallowed whatever words he wanted to unleash. Helen, tears don't make you valuable. You get nothing, though you may keep the dishes. Aunt Helen sucked in a sharp breath, eyes glistening. She didn't let the tears fall. Margaret had trained her out of that long ago. Adrian, you were my last chance. My golden boy. You inherit the house, the trust, and the archives. Guard them. Adrian didn't blink, didn't twitch. He lowered his head like a soldier taking orders. Then Irene paused. And my name came next. Clara. The runaway. You'll receive what you've been searching for. The truth. Right where you left it. The words hung in the air like smoke, choking the room. Every eye shifted to me. I stayed frozen, staring at the notebook, waiting for more, for a line that might explain what she meant. What does that mean? My voice cracked, rough with disuse. I hadn't spoken aloud in this house for years. Irene didn't answer. Instead, she slid open a drawer beneath the table and pulled out a key iron, heavy, its edges curled with rust. It unlocks the East Library, she murmured. It's been sealed since the night you left. For a moment, I thought I saw her hesitate, as if weighing whether to add something more. Her eyes flicked toward Adrian, then back to me. And remember, she added quietly, there used to be 2 keys. I took the key. A long-buried fear stirred inside me, the same one I had felt as a child whenever my fingers brushed a forbidden door. Adrian stood, his voice calm but edged with frost. You've traveled far. Rest tonight. Visit the library in the morning. I searched his face for the cousin I remembered, the boy who once clung to me when the house grew too loud. But there was nothing left of him. Only emptiness. I'll go now. The silence stretched. Adrian gave the smallest nod. And I walked toward the east wing, the place where my mother's bookcase had once stood. The room no one ever mentioned. The one I had always feared. The East Library. Its door was layered in dust, sealed like a tomb waiting for its grave to be disturbed. Memories, grief, dread rolled over me all at once like a flood. I still think about that morning when my dad never came home. I was 6 years old. The sky was gray, damp. Mom was making apple pancakes, and I was perched on a tall stool, licking honey from my fingers. Dad bent down, kissed the top of my head, and said, "Be good, Clara. I've got a long meeting today." Then he stepped out into the rain. That was the last time I ever saw him. His car collided with a truck on the highway. The other driver was high. The doctors said Dad died instantly. Mom never said a word. She just sat in his chair and stayed there. A day, 2 days, maybe longer. I remember stuffing cookies into my pocket because she forgot we needed to eat. 3 months later, she was gone too. There wasn't a scene. No shouting. No bags by the door. One morning I woke up and she wasn't in the kitchen, wasn't in her room. Her robe was still hanging on the chair. But she was gone. I waited the whole day. Finally, I called Aunt Helen. The next morning, my grandmother arrived and took me away. No one explained. All I overheard were whispers. Psychological instability. She couldn't handle it. The child will be better off with Margaret. And that was that. I was passed along like damaged goods. Life in my grandmother's house was silent. At first, I couldn't figure out why no one ever laughed there. Even the servants walked on tiptoe. The television stayed off unless she permitted otherwise. At dinner, if anyone spoke at all, it was in hushed voices. Once, I asked about my mom. My grandmother looked at me like I had spat on her plate. She set down her fork, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and said, "In this family, We don't discuss certain things. You'll learn. And I did. I learned to sit straight. Keep my eyes on the plate. Dress the way she liked. Never argue. I learned that when my grandmother said, "good," she meant obedient. That her silence meant she was angry. That her smile was a warning. I became a haze. Quiet. Cold. Controlled. But somewhere inside me, my mother still lived. I searched for her in secret. In the basement. In closets. In the pantry. I saved her old hair clip. Found one of her recipe notebooks. Wore her sweater when no one was looking. Sometimes I would run the bathroom faucet so no one could hear me and whisper her name, trying to remember her voice, or at least the rhythm of it. And once, in a forgotten drawer of my father's desk, I found a folded receipt for book restoration, dated months before his death. The address matched the East Library. My father had known something was hidden there. He had tried to preserve it. That receipt became the only proof I had that maybe he, too, had fought the silence. Those were my small rebellions. On the outside, I was perfect. I won debates. I represented the family at charity events. I sang the national anthem on City Day. I played the role of a statue, flawless, unmoving. Until the night I turned 16. A letter came from Washington. A scholarship to the Northbridge Institute of Mathematics. Full ride. Room and board. Everything covered. I carried it to my grandmother. She read it without a word, folded it once, folded it again, and dropped it into the fire. It's pointless. You'll attend Holridge Business College. Business, like Helen. I didn't argue. I just nodded. And that night I left. 6 miles to the bus station. 1 backpack. $100 in my pocket. My heart pounding like an echo of a voice I could barely remember. I wasn't chasing the future. I was running away from the past. I reached New York at dawn, a city that didn't care who I was or why I had come. It didn't ask why I had run away. It didn't demand explanations. The city just kept moving, loud, messy, alive, and that was enough. Those first months felt like crawling out of a shipwreck. I slept on a pull-out bed in a room shared with strangers who rotated in and out weekly. I took whatever work I could find, waiting tables, cleaning, tutoring immigrant kids in English, anything that didn't ask questions. And at night, I studied. Math saved me. It was the only thing that never judged, never asked about my past, never punished me for laughing too loud. I spent hours in public libraries, then laundromats and coffee shops with weak Wi-Fi. I devoured statistics, logic, computer science. I wrote clumsy little programs on an old pawnshop laptop I had bought with tip money. And little by little, I began to see a world where I wasn't just surviving. I was living. But my mom's voice never left me. I caught myself talking to her in my head on the subway, in the bathroom, standing at an ATM. I imagined her cheering me on, telling me to keep going. I even bought the same shampoo she used, just for the smell, to feel like she was close again. Once, on the street, I heard someone shout Sarah. My mother's name. My chest seized. But it was only a girl calling for her nanny. Still, I froze, rooted to the spot. Those moments stayed with me. Even after I had a place of my own. Even after I found steady work. Even after my first big break, a cybersecurity internship at a small startup. By 23, I managed to rent my first studio. Tiny. Damp. But mine. And yet I would wake from dreams with her voice in my ear, my grandmother's voice, hissing, "It's not your place to choose. Your place is to endure." But I endured. And I chose anyway. I didn't change my last name. I didn't pretend to be someone else. But I didn't advertise it either. In New York, nobody cares who you were, only who you managed to become. And still, the past had its ways of reaching me. One night, working late at a university lab, the lights went out without warning. The emergency lamps stayed dark. The silence was suffocating. I froze, the same way I had in Hayes Hill whenever the power cut out, and I swore I heard whispers behind locked doors. My fingers tightened around the edge of the desk until, finally, the lights flickered back. It was nothing. Just a circuit. But the memory it woke inside me was louder than the dark itself. And I had become. Piece by piece, I built myself out of nothing. out of a voice I was never supposed to have. I thought I had buried the past. Thought I was done with that frightened girl who jumped at every shadow and every locked door. I thought all the answers were waiting in the future. Then the letter came. The same pale green envelope. The handwriting I recognized instantly. And I knew it wasn't over. It was only beginning. Now here I was again, standing in front of a door, not sure if this was a beginning or an ending. The key pressed heavy into my palm, colder than its iron weight. The East Library. Even the name felt forbidden. A place the house itself seemed to recoil from. It was the only key I had ever been given. And the only door I had never been allowed to touch. As a child, I had drifted near it once or twice. It wasn't just locked, it felt severed, as if silence itself guarded the threshold. My grandmother always claimed the family archives were inside. But no archive makes your skin crawl. From the far end of the hallway, the door seemed to stare back at me. Dark wood. A brass handle gone dull with time. Curtains drooping over a narrow window, thick with dust. And the old feelings came rushing back, the same vulnerability I had felt when I was 6, when I was 8. Lying awake at night, too scared to cry because she might hear me. The house felt alive and not on my side. I sat on the windowsill across from the door, the key biting into my palm. For the first time in years, I let myself stop pretending to be strong. I buried my face in my hands. I remembered hiding in that exact spot, listening to Margaret scold Helen in the kitchen. I remembered holding shallow breaths, as if breathing too deeply might draw her attention. And I remembered the one time I heard something behind that door, a sound caught between a whisper and a sob. When I asked Irene about it, she snapped, "You imagined it. Just pipes." After that, I heard nothing. Only my own footsteps running away. And now here I was, holding the key. My grandmother hadn't left me money. Or property. She had left me a secret. Not a gift. A challenge. She must have known I wouldn't ignore it. That I would have to open it. That I would start digging. Maybe that was her final move. One last game. One last test. It took me hours to decide. I waited until the house went still. The silence was exactly as I remembered from childhood, thick, suffocating, electric. And then, as I stood to walk toward the door, the lights in the corridor blinked out. Pitch black. The air seemed to contract around me. My pulse hammered in my ears. For a second, I thought I heard footsteps, then only silence. I gripped the key harder, refusing to let fear send me running like a child again. My free hand brushed along the wallpaper until, at last, the sconces flickered back to life. Nothing had moved. But the warning was clear. This house still knew how to fight back. Finally, I faced the door. And I walked toward it. The key turned in the lock with a crack that rang out louder than a gunshot. The hinges groaned low and reluctant as the door eased inward. A breath of stale, papery air rolled out, dry, oppressive, ancient. The smell struck me immediately. Not mold. Not dust. Something older. Dry, heavy, like a library abandoned by time itself. The room was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown. Shelves pressed against the walls, their books layered in dust, cobwebs stretched across brittle spines. But the center of the room was different. There was a table. And on it, one object. A book. Leather-bound, deep wine red, its gold embossing catching the sliver of light that slipped through the curtains. It didn't belong to this place. It was too deliberate. Too personal. I stepped closer. It wasn't closed. It lay open, waiting, as if someone had placed it there for me, choosing this page to be the first thing I saw. If you're reading this, I couldn't get away. But I tried. And I fought. My breath caught. I knew that handwriting. Thin. Slanted. A little uneven. My mother's. My hands trembled as I turned the page. Notes. Dozens of them. Not a diary. Letters. But not to the world. To me. I'm leaving this not because I want you to know everything, but because I know you'll never be able to leave otherwise. The words slammed into me. Your grandmother said she would take you if I didn't obey. She told me you'd be better off without me raised right, raised properly, not by some crazy mother. She said it was either you or freedom. I sank to the floor. The house. The years. The silence. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered were the words. Her voice. Alive, reaching through the lines, breathing again. And then it hit me. This wasn't an archive. It had never been an archive. It was a snare. A test. Margaret hadn't left me the truth out of remorse. She had left it because she knew I would come looking. Because she knew I wouldn't be able to turn away. She knew I wouldn't stop. That I would keep peeling back layers. That I would go all the way. And so the game began. Even in death, she was still pulling the strings. And I had just taken my first step onto the board. From somewhere down the corridor, a floorboard creaked. Too deliberate, too sharp to be the house settling. My pulse surged, but when I glanced at the doorway, there was nothing, only shadows pressing against the frame. The silence felt staged. Like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do next. The next morning, I returned to the library armed with a flashlight, gloves, and a notebook. Focused. Determined. The kind of determination I had learned to bury under years of enforced silence. My mother's book had only been the beginning. On its last page she had written, "I'm leaving again. But not here. You can't trust anyone. Especially the ones who feed on silence." A clue. I started with the boxes stacked tight against the walls. Old cardboard, tied with string, labels written in my grandmother's deliberate hand. Lydia Hayes, 1991. Medical. Personal. Do not open without permission from M.H. That signature M.H., her mark of ownership stamped even on the smallest scraps of paper. But now she was gone. And I no longer needed her permission. The first box held school notebooks, photographs of my mother smiling. I froze. I had never seen her like that before, carefree laughing. A version of her that existed only before me. Before Margaret. Before the silence. The second box, medical files. At first, routine checkups, prescriptions, vaccinations. Then everything shifted. Notes after my father's death, shorter, colder. Words stripped of feeling, psycho-emotional instability. Supervision advised. Possible schizoaffective symptoms. And then, a resolution from a private clinic. Dated 3 days before she disappeared, the patient refused further treatment. Signature confirmed. But the signature wasn't hers. I knew my mother's writing. This was different. Sharp. Harsh. Forged. My grip tightened as I slid the paper into a separate folder. The third box, a cassette. Old, a little warped, but intact. My hands trembled as I lifted it, just as they had when I was a child, reading one of Margaret's barbed Christmas notes dressed up as love. I carried the tape upstairs to the study. The recorder was still there. In this house, nothing ever moved. Change had never been permitted. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Clear. I see. Lydia can't handle it. She's weak. If she won't accept her role, we'll have to act. Isolate her. The child will be our chance. She'll grow up right. No whispers. No screams. I froze. She had known. She had planned. She had erased my mother by design and expected no one to ever question it. Then I noticed something else. The cassette sleeve bore a faint, smudged stamp from the clinic's archives. It meant this tape had once been part of an official file. Someone had removed it, hidden it here. Later, Irene would admit the truth. Margaret had ordered duplicates destroyed, but she hadn't burned this one. She couldn't. She slipped it away, sealed, and kept it for years. That was why it had survived at all. In our state, one-party consent was enough. Margaret had insisted on recording everything, convinced documentation was power. And now her own paranoia had become evidence against her. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned. Adrian leaned in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching. What did you find? His voice was soft. Too soft. Nothing yet, I lied. He stepped inside, eyes flicking to the recorder. Not everything in the past is worth dragging back. And not every silence deserves protecting, I answered. We stared at each other. Really stared. No childhood memories between us. No excuses. You've turned into her, he whispered. Into Lydia. Just as stubborn. Just as dangerous. I'm not dangerous, Adrian. I'm just done being afraid. He exhaled, shoulders tightening. You have 2 weeks. Then the estate is mine. And you'll be gone. For good. I stayed quiet. Because deep down, I already knew I wasn't leaving. Not with empty hands. But something in his tone unsettled me. He wasn't just guarding Margaret's memory, he was guarding secrets. Adrian knew more about those missing pieces than he was willing to admit. That night, I sat on the floor of the East Library, surrounded by piles of papers. Some yellowed with age. Others suspiciously crisp, though stamped with dates from the 90s. Signatures. Stamps. Medical reports. Notes. And I couldn't tell what was authentic and what was forged. So I did the one thing I knew how to do best. I organized. For folders. Medical, every document tied to my mother's psychiatric evaluations. Personal, her letters, notes, scraps of diary. Suspicious, the pages where the handwriting wasn't hers. Audio, the cassette tape, already copied onto a flash drive. While sorting, the lights flickered once, briefly plunging me into dark. I froze, clutching the folders. But when the lamp steadied again, Adrian was gone from the doorway. Whether he had left or simply stepped back into the shadows, I couldn't tell. That night, I called the only lawyer I trusted. He arranged for a psychiatrist to review the files. The next morning, I mailed the copies. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from the weight of what I was setting in motion. A step I couldn't undo. Later, I wandered into my mother's old bedroom. It looked untouched, as if time itself had stopped. An empty perfume bottle still sat on the vanity. On the nightstand, a photo of me on Dad's shoulders, Mom laughing beside us. That smile. The one Margaret had crushed. In a drawer, I found a small notebook. The kind a schoolgirl might carry. A heart doodled on the cover. Inside, formulas, sketches, recipes for home remedies. And then one line that froze me in place. If I disappear, it's not my choice. It's her decision. A chill swept through me. Out in the hallway, I spotted Aunt Helen by the window, smoking. Her hands trembled slightly. I hadn't even known she smoked. Aren't you tired? She asked softly. No. She studied me for a long moment before speaking again. She never did anything without a reason, Clara. Everything she did meant something. I said nothing. Helen lowered her voice. We all lived under her control. When Lydia spoke out, she vanished. When you ran, she erased you. But she never really let you go. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked. Because I was scared. She crushed the cigarette into a teacup. Her eyes glistened. And now I'm more ashamed than I am afraid. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Here. Lydia gave this to me. She told me to give it to you if you ever came back. I never opened it. My palms were damp as I took it. Back in my room, I unfolded the letter. Clara, if anyone tells you silence is strength, don't believe them. Silence is chains. You are strong because you hear yourself, even when the world wants you quiet. It wasn't just a letter. It was a blessing. And forgiveness. I slipped it into my pocket, next to the flash drive with Margaret's voice on it. I wasn't running anymore. Now I was preparing to testify. And I knew the moment I spoke, the house and everyone tied to it would never be the same again. I was walking back from the post office after mailing the documents to my lawyer when I spotted Adrian waiting near the greenhouse. He stood under an arch of grapevines, hands shoved deep in his pockets, face composed. But I knew how to read him by now. The stiffness in his neck. The fists tucked out of sight. The uneven rhythm of his breathing. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded. We stepped inside. The air was thick, humid, heavy with the scent of soil and citrus. Palms and lemon trees closed in around us. For a moment, it almost felt like we were kids again. Almost. Why are you digging all this up? He asked. It's been more than 20 years. Nothing can change now. Or are you afraid I'll find something that will change everything? He didn't answer. Just stared at a lemon ripening on the branch. You've changed, he said finally. You used to understand when to stay quiet. When not to rock the boat. I grew up, Adrian. I learned you can't keep swallowing stones. Do you realize what happens if this goes to court? The family, the town, the name ruined. It's already rotten, I told him. You've just gotten used to the smell. He stepped closer. Too close. You'll turn into her, Clara. Relentless. Heavy. Alone. Better alone, I shot back, then strangled by silence. His eyes flickered. And for the first time, it wasn't anger I saw. It was pain. I heard her, he whispered. Talking about your mom. About isolation, about reshaping generations. But I was just a kid. I didn't know she meant it literally. When did it hit you? When your mom disappeared. But by then, it was too late. I studied him. He looked smaller. Fragile, even. I was scared, he admitted. She was molding me into her heir. A role that never fit. But I wore it anyway. And now? I asked. What are you doing now? He hesitated, jaw tightening. Trying not to burn everything down. Hoping you'll be smarter than she was. Less reckless. I leaned in close. Don't be afraid I'll become her. Be afraid I'll become me. I walked out first. When I looked back, he was still standing by the doorway, his shoulders sagging like the weight of something had just crushed him. He wasn't my childhood brother anymore. But he wasn't my enemy either. Not yet. And the way he avoided my eyes told me one thing: he was hiding more than he was willing to admit. For now. On the 5th day at Hayes Hill, my phone buzzed. Clara, I sent the report. Call me once you've read it. Caleb. The only lawyer I trusted. He never pried, never speculated. He just delivered. The email had a single attachment. Subject line: Preliminary analysis of Lydia Hayes's documents. I opened it while sitting in my grandmother's old office, the same room where her so-called family meetings had always felt more like interrogations. The psychiatrist's conclusions stared back at me. All documents and notes indicate systematic psychological isolation, emotional pressure, and probable falsification of medical grounds for hospitalization. Handwriting analysis suggests the signature on the final clinic document does not match Lydia Hayes's. Likely forgery. Forgery. The word carried weight. Not just emotional truth, legal truth. Evidence. A forensic handwriting expert had compared samples, tracked the chain of custody, even requested the clinic's original file. The seal on their envelope confirmed authenticity. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. I glimpsed a folded newspaper through the window, left on the gatepost. Its headline called Margaret Hayes a pillar of the community. And beneath it, a smaller line: Family estate enters legal dispute. The town had already started whispering. This wasn't just emotional truth. It was criminal. The file included scanned signatures, side-by-side comparisons, even a linguistic breakdown of the medical notes. One detail chilled me: correspondence between the clinic and an unnamed third party. The signature on those letters, M.H. My grandmother had personally signed off on my mother's so-called care. I called Caleb. This is solid, he said. And if more surfaces, we won't just challenge the will. We'll have grounds for a criminal case. There will be more, I told him. She never played short games. And the endgame? I looked out the window as the trees blurred into dusk. Yes, but this time, it belongs to me. After the call, I sat in silence. When you hold the truth, there's no need to shout it. You build it. Piece by piece. With evidence. With precision. Calmness sharper than fury. On the stairs, Irene was waiting. She held something small in her hands. There's another tape, she said. I kept it. I didn't know if you were ready. She made me initial every envelope before we sealed it, Irene added, almost apologizing. No paper, no power. That was her rule. But one time I disobeyed. I slipped this cassette into my own bag and told her it was destroyed. I'm ready. She passed it to me. The label showed only a date. The day before my mother disappeared. Is it her? I asked. Irene nodded. Her voice. And someone else's. I don't know who. But it sounds final. Like the end of something. Or maybe the start. I clenched the cassette in my hand. The truth was getting louder. Even from the grave, my grandmother was still whispering. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian already knew exactly which part of that truth had been buried. I sat on the floor of my old childhood bedroom, the cassette player perched on the bed in front of me. I pressed play. At first, static. Then her voice. My mother's. Worn, but steady. I'm not going away. You can't force me. I'm taking Clara, and we're leaving. I've made up my mind. Silence. And as the static crackled, my phone buzzed with a news alert. A local paper headline flashed across the screen. Runaway heiress threatens to tear down family legacy. My name was in the article. They painted me as unstable, bitter, ready to destroy everything for attention. Adrian hadn't needed to say a word. The town was already being primed to see me as the villain. The price of truth was starting to show. Then my grandmother's reply. Calm. Clear. Cold. You've made up your mind? Child, I decide where you belong. That's how it's always been. I heard my mother sigh, the faint rustle of paper, the sound of her gripping something tight. Our bags are packed. We're leaving in the morning. And if you try to stop me, I'll go to the police. And then, the moment that changed everything. My grandmother's voice dropped, sharp as a knife. You don't understand, Lydia. You don't have a choice. You only have what I allow you to have. And I no longer allow you to have that. Click. End. I sat frozen. It wasn't just a tape. It was a voice pulled from the grave. Intent. Plain. Cold. Deadly. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spread everything across the floor, letters, photographs, tapes. I sketched a timeline. A map. At the center, Margaret. From her, arrows stretched outward, to my mother. To my father. To me. And for the first time, I asked myself, why hadn't she destroyed this? Because to Margaret, records weren't memories, they were weapons. She kept duplicates, initials in the margins, wax seals on envelopes. Even the family's own counsel had drafted retention memos, giving her a pretext to keep everything, especially the medical correspondence. She trusted locks more than flames. Why leave it behind for me? The answer came sharp and clear. She wanted me to find it. She wanted me to break. Not through silence, but by forcing me to speak. By making me her final test. Her last, perfect punishment. But I didn't break. She thought she had left me no choice. And I chose anyway, not revenge, but truth. Still, when dawn came, a different thought unsettled me. This tape shouldn't have survived at all. Unless someone else wanted it to. Unless someone had chosen not to burn it. And the way Adrian stayed silent when I mentioned it the next day told me everything I needed to know. Before confronting the others, I called Caleb again. The second tape, I told him. Seal it in evidence bags, he instructed. Chain of custody has to start now. I'll file an official motion to subpoena the clinic's archive for corroboration. His calmness steadied me. The law had rules Margaret couldn't bend anymore. That evening, everyone gathered for dinner. Just like before. Only this time, it wasn't Margaret pulling the strings. It was the weight of the truth pressing in from all sides. Adrian. Helen. Uncle Victor. Even Irene. All of us seated at the old mahogany table. The silence stretched like a rope about to snap. I stood at the far end. Not like my grandmother once did, commanding through fear. But in the one way she would have hated most. Openly. Directly. I'm taking this to court, I said. Helen's face drained of color. Victor lowered his eyes to his plate, pretending to study the cutlery. Adrian smiled. Crooked. Cold. So that's your grand plan? Turn us into a circus. No, I said. It was hers. She staged it perfectly. I tossed the flash drive onto the table. It clattered against the wood. Her voice. And my mother's. Proof. And motive. Adrian leaned forward. Motive for what? Isolation. Forced medication. And maybe even her disappearance. The words hit like stones tossed into still water. Ripples spread across every face. You just want to rip up the will, Adrian muttered. I want my mother's name cleared. I want the truth acknowledged. You'll destroy everything, Adrian snapped. The reputation. The business. Everything we were. You weren't anything, I fired back. It was all pretend. And I won't pretend anymore. Adrian shot to his feet. For once, the mask dropped. His voice broke, raw with fury. She wanted to break you, Clara. She knew you couldn't handle this. The truth isn't medicine, it's poison. I locked eyes with him, steady. She was wrong. The silence that followed wasn't fear anymore. It was reality settling over us. Helen stood first. She walked around the table and set a hand on my shoulder. If you need my testimony, you'll have it. Irene nodded. I always knew it couldn't end with silence. I turned back to Adrian. You can stand with us. Or keep living as her shadow. He didn't answer. His lips pressed tight, fists trembling at his sides. And in his eyes, for just a flicker, I saw panic. Not just fear of losing control. Fear of something else he had buried with her. Then he stormed out. And for the first time in years, I felt not only strength, but the right to it. Still, the thought clung to me. Adrian's fury wasn't just about Margaret. It was about something else he was terrified I might uncover. It was tucked inside a Bible on the top shelf of the locked library. An envelope. Heavy cream paper. Sealed with wax. No name, just the initials M.H. I broke the seal. Inside were several pages, written in her flawless, deliberate script. Asterisk, Clara. If you're reading this, it means you went exactly where I wanted you to. Your father betrayed me. He chose love over duty. Your mother betrayed me. She mistook my care for cruelty. And you betrayed me because you ran, abandoning everything I built for you. I was not a wonderful mother. I won't ask for forgiveness. But I was strong. I built a future. A family no one could break. And you broke it. So I leave you the truth. Not as a gift. As poison. Drink it, Clara. Stare into the reality you and your parents ruined. And then try to live with it. I believed that once you uncovered how things truly were, you'd fall. Break like your mother. Lose your freedom. Because freedom is a myth. But if you're still standing as you read this, then I have lost. And for the first time in my life, that terrifies me. Margaret. Asterisk. I read it once. Twice. A third time. By then, the tears wouldn't come. She hadn't left the truth out of remorse. She left it as a weapon. Her final move. She calculated it would crush me, that I'd follow my mother's path, resist, collapse, disappear. But she miscalculated. I wasn't her victim. I was her witness. The voice she had spent years silencing, not through shouting, but through silence. Through sharp, merciless control. And now I wasn't tied to this house. Or to her name. Or to her shadow. What held me here was one thing only. Not revenge. Liberation. For myself. For my mother. For anyone still fighting to escape people like her. And I knew her final game wasn't over yet. Not until I turned her poison into proof. The courtroom felt cold. Not from the air, but from the weight pressing down in that space. Dark suits. Lawyers. Journalists. Faces I half recognized from town. Some glared at me like I had shattered their precious fairy tale about the Hayes family. I sat straight, a stack of evidence laid out before me, documents, expert reports, copies of my mother's diaries, audio recordings sealed in evidence bags. Caleb had filed the chain of custody. The judge had accepted it into the record. Before openings, the court had already subpoenaed a representative from the clinic. He arrived with certified copies from the clinic's archive and a custody log. The state register's seal on the envelope matched the file numbers in our exhibits. The clerk logged both sets side by side. But more important than the papers and tapes, I had a voice. A right that had been stolen from 3 generations before me. My lawyer spoke first. Calm. Controlled. He pointed out the forged signatures, the psychological manipulation, the medical records that crumbled under examination. He quoted Irene. He quoted Aunt Helen. Then he played the recording, my grandmother's voice talking openly about isolation. The clinic's representative confirmed their policy of routine recording and that duplicates had existed, exactly what Irene later described. I glanced at the jury. For the first time, they weren't just nodding politely. They looked horrified. Then it was my turn. I was 6 when my mother disappeared. She didn't run away. She was forced out, given no choice. And all these years, I was told to keep quiet. Don't stir things up. But silence itself becomes a crime when it's used to bury the truth. Adrian's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is editorializing. She has a personal vendetta, her reputation in this community proves it. A ripple of whispers swept through the gallery. The local paper's article about me, runaway heiress threatens family legacy, was already doing its damage. For a moment, doubt tried to slip in. This was the price of truth. Every word I spoke could be twisted into a weapon against me. But I didn't flinch. My reputation, I said evenly, was written by the same silence that buried my mother. Today, I'm writing it back. The judge overruled the objection. The jury leaned forward. And I knew the counterattack had begun. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Hayes, do you have any evidence of intent? I looked down at the flash drive. At Margaret's letter, the one I hadn't burned. I knew this moment would come. I passed it to my lawyer. This is her letter. To me. In it, she admits she didn't leave me the truth out of guilt. She left it to break me. Her way of cutting down the last link in her chain of so-called traitors. The clerk accepted it, logged it, sealed it into evidence. The judge skimmed the transcript, his expression hardening. The room fell into silence. And then the final witness was called. Adrian. He walked slowly to the stand. His gray jacket looked rumpled, out of character. When his eyes lifted, I didn't see rage. I didn't see Margaret's golden hair. I saw a man stripped bare. Exhausted. But honest. I heard her, he began. I knew what she was doing to Lydia. And I didn't stop her. Because I was afraid. Afraid of becoming nothing. She made me her successor, her golden boy. And I let her. Because it was easier. He faltered, his hand trembling as he tugged at his cuff. There's more, he said at last, his voice cracking. There were documents. Evidence that could have damned her years ago. I destroyed them. Because she told me it was the only way to protect the family. And I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. One woman in the gallery covered her mouth. Adrian turned toward me. But I can't live with that lie anymore. I support Clara's case. And I'll testify against her, against myself if I have to. The truth deserves to outlive us. It hit like thunder. After decades of silence, his words shook the ground. I stared at him. We weren't allies. We weren't family in any way that mattered. But in that moment, he did what he had never dared to do before. And that meant we had already won. Or at the very least, we had broken the silence. The verdict came 3 weeks later. The court struck down Margaret Hayes' will. The estate would be redistributed. And a formal investigation into the forged medical documents was opened. But those were just rulings on paper. The real verdict was quieter. My grandmother's grip was gone. Her silence no longer bound anyone. The press turned hungry. Local papers ran headlines, heiress exposes family's dark past, golden boy breaks his silence. Commentators debated whether I was courageous or reckless. My name trended for a week. I was invited to appear on television, to give interviews, to become the face of psychological abuse in wealthy families. I turned it down. They asked me why. Because this was never about spectacle. It was about the people still trapped in houses like mine. With grandmothers like mine. With silence like mine. I didn't want to be a symbol of tragedy. I wanted to be proof that something could be done. So I built something. A foundation. I called it the Lydia Foundation. Psychologists. Lawyers. Counselors. Soon the letters started arriving. Desperate letters. Silent letters. And we read every single one. Because I know what it feels like to write words you're not sure anyone will ever see. Hayes Hill was sold. Part of the money went into the foundation. I kept some not as payment. Not as compensation. But as a reminder, truth is worth more than gold. Adrian became a history teacher at a local school. We crossed paths a few times. No masks. No pretending. Not friends. Not enemies. Just two survivors walking out of the same storm in different directions. I went back to New York. On my desk at the office was an envelope. No name. No return address. Inside, a dried rose. The same kind pressed between the pages of my mother's diary. And a note. Silence is no longer your cage. Now it's your choice. Speak. I smiled. Margaret had left me poison. I turned it into proof. And that was enough. Margaret had left me the truth to shatter me. But I used it to carve out freedom. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was an ending. And it was my beginning. She left me the truth to ruin me. Instead, it ruined her legacy. The house, the silence, the chains gone. What remained was the proof, the voice she never wanted to outlive her. And that was enough.